Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thank you all for being here and welcome once again to Con Fuerza Experiences Wisdom Wednesday. I am so happy you're here and in community with us, either live or maybe later watching this as a recording. This series it's a LinkedIn Live series to be able to inspire social impact leaders and have nurturing conversations with social justice leaders about how we're pursuing our passion, how we're creating impact in our community, all while preserving our well-being. As a reminder, we can only continue to create and make this world a little bit better if we continue to sustain ourselves in the process. So this conversations are really to honor our ancestors and our lineages before us that shared wisdom through storytelling, through being in community together, and just talking it out, figuring it out together. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Manuela Contreras, she, her, ella, and I'm your host for today. I am the founder and chief inspiration officer of Con Fuerza Experiences, and as a leadership and business strategy consultant, facilitator, and experience creator, I started Con Fuerza to inspire leaders, and so leaders can exist where they can live in harmony with pursuing their passion and also preserving our well-being. I am a Latina woman with caramel skin, brown wavy hair, and brown eyes. And today I am wearing my brown glasses. I have my black headset, which you can kind of see behind my curly hair. And I'm wearing a green, shiny button-down shirt with this beautiful necklace that I got from family friends in Colombia that have these imprinted flowers on it. And so, as we get settled here, usually I give a little bit of a disclaimer and ways of how to engage with us in the community, but we are being respectful of our guests' time today. So please check the comment section so we can ensure that you can engage with us. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the private messages. And for those of you that are new to us and joining our calls for the first time, something we love to do is to start our calls with a somatic practice. Somatics are really about not only connecting to our mind, but connecting to our body. And for me, it has been such a great way to support my own healing journey, my own connection to preserving my well-being. So I like introducing it to all of you as these little techniques that you can introduce into your daily routine, or if you're an organization leader and want to find another practice to incorporate into your daily meetings, retreats, or workshops, feel free to see how you can incorporate this to connect you to your body. And today we have a special treat because our guest is actually a emotional health and mindfulness coach, and she's been doing the somatic practices for a very long time. So Leslie's actually going to guide us today through our somatic practice before we get into our conversation. So Leslie, thank you for being with us, and I'm so excited for you to guide us through our somatic practice of today.
Yeah, I'm so excited as well. Thank you so much. I'll introduce myself here in a moment, but first let's just take a moment to just breathe. This is a meditation that I like to call the stop meditation. I learned it from my teacher, Ashley Turner, and it just allows us to be present in our body using the five senses. So we'll start with the letter S for stop. So we'll stop. T, we'll take a breath. Exhale. Now, O, gently open your eyes if you close them, and then just observe what's around you. What can you see? Sometimes I like to look for 5 things that are my favorite color. Maybe you can feel the texture of the desk or the chair, the clothes that you're wearing. So stop, take a breath, observe what's around you, and then letter P, proceed with right now. It's a very simple does not mean without effort, but it's a very simple practice to come to. I teach this to a lot of the journalists that I work with, especially before deadlines, before big interviews, before live shots if they're in TV, but it's quite a quick grounding practice.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Leslie, for guiding us through that. I've loved, this is such a simple technique, but I love you said that simple does not mean no effort. Yes. Because you can incorporate it and it can just take a few minutes. And as if you're ever feeling anxious or nervous going into any setting, you can use this. So thank you for guiding us and sharing this practice with our community. Now I'm really excited to introduce you. You heard a little bit and got to experience a little bit of Leslie's work, but before we get started, I just want to acknowledge you and thank you for being here. And you are a journalist, you're a yoga instructor and teacher, you are an author and an MC, and there is so much that have done in your life now. And now I'm so excited we've had the opportunity to work together for now about a year too, which has been really special. So I was really excited to bring Leslie into this conversation because her and I have been talking about this as we enter this election season, and as the news is consistently going and has not changed around us, and there's so much heaviness around us around how do we manage it? How do we stay informed as social impact leaders? We know the importance of staying abreast and informed of everything that's happening in our political system, in the world around us, so we can continue to be intentional about our practices. But sometimes it can feel really overwhelming. So I'm excited to bring Leslie into our circle and to give Leslie an opportunity to introduce herself and share a bit about her journey with all of you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Manuela. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Leslie Rangel. As Manuela said, I'm a journalist, I'm an emotional health coach, a mindfulness coach, a yoga instructor. In fact, right after this, I'm teaching a yoga class. But that's just a little bit about me, a visual description of me. I'm a Latina woman, I have olive toned skin, long black hair. I'm wearing minimal makeup today. I do have on my black guayabera top. It's got colorful embroidery. So shout out to Chasing Camila. She is a local artisan here in Texas. I'm based in Austin. I love supporting other women of color in their entrepreneurial journey. So little shout out to her there. I also have on some gold hoops and an ojo of protection necklace that my mom gave me. It's a little golden necklace. I'm also first generation Mexican American, daughter of immigrants, also raised by a Guatemalan dad as well. So that's a little bit about me.
Oh, thank you, Leslie. So special. And, there's so much that has happened and that has brought you here, but I would love to give space to that of, what about your journey? How has well-being played a role into your journey, and what really led you to want to have this conversation or create these spaces with us today?
Yeah. So let's see, how far back should we go?
Right.
So for me, movement has always been a part of my life. Growing up, I would see my mom dance. I'm going out on a skinny limb here, but just growing up around a lot of childhood trauma and really tough spaces, I have beautiful, fond memories of my mom just dancing. If anything horrible was happening in our childhood, there'd always be the music. Turn the music up. Y vamos a bailar. Let's dance, hijas. And so movement has always played a part in that. And as I grew older, through high school and to college and into my professional career, that was something that I always took with me. But one thing that I didn't always realize is how often we do not take the time to be still. And the movement is what kept us going. It's what kept us alive. But there's another part to that, right? The part of stillness. And so for a long time, also being a daughter of immigrants, I was instilled, like many immigrant children, put your head down, work hard. Trabaja duro, hija. You can do it. Like, we're here. We got to push through. Échale ganas. um, give it your all. And so that's what I did. And it worked really well. I was a great student. I went through college and I did 2 majors. I did 8 internships. I got a Spanish language teaching degree. I got a journalism degree. I was poised to live out my dream. I wanted to be on Good Morning America, one of the morning anchors, the whole thing. And I was well on that path. And in 2015, a very similar election cycle to what we're in now. I remember I was covering a political rally and everything was going great. I was standing right next to national news networks and I was really excited. Like, here I am doing my thing. They're going to notice me. I'm going to get to, my career is just going to take a trajectory here that is going to be great. And as I'm covering this rally, I'm starting to hear some really tough political jargon, and in many ways, a lot of racist jargon that I don't believe our country had ever really heard before in that manner and in such a public way. And what happened to me was I got emotional first. I didn't know what was happening to me, and I felt really ashamed. Like, what's happening? Why am I crying? I'm a journalist. I'm not supposed to feel anything. I'm just here to report what one side says, what the other side says. We go live and we just do the thing. Um, what I know now is that that day I had a panic attack, and it wasn't because of the political rally or the coverage that I was doing. That was just the very tip of a very large, deep iceberg of emotions that I had been suppressing for years and years and years. And so in that moment, I like to say sometimes it's the moment where that particular political candidate literally saved my life, because if it wouldn't have been for that moment of my body saying it's time to pay attention, it's time to find healing, I don't know where I'd be now. And so it took me down a trajectory of either, Leslie, you're going to pay attention to everything you've been suppressing, or we're going to ignore it, and who knows what journey that will take. And so luckily for me, I chose the healing route, and I started diving deep into trying to figure out where these emotions were coming from. Why was I feeling these things? Why did I feel sad? What was even depression? I wasn't anti-therapy then. I just didn't know anybody who'd really done therapy, and now we're talking like literally 10 years ago. These conversations on mental health and wellness and somatics, they were not normalized in the way they are starting to be now. And so my easiest path into this healing journey was yoga. And I'm so lucky that I found the yoga teacher that I did, because his name's Andrew Epler from Norman, Oklahoma, and his direct teachers are from Mysore. And so the lineage of that yoga training was very pure and true to what the 8 limbs of yoga are, which is, it we could go down a whole rabbit hole down that, but basically it's the knowing that yoga is not about the poses or the shapes. In fact, you could never do a yoga pose again and still live a yogic life. And so through this training that he shared with us and that I took, I really understood what it meant to be still, what it meant to be silent, what it meant to look within. What does all that even mean? Why should we be still? And it just continued on from there. Yoga was the first little thing, and then eventually I made my way into therapy, and then I went into somatics. I took a yoga psychology, yoga teacher training, working directly with a therapist who was teaching us to be aware of these things. And then ultimately in 2020, a friend of mine approached me and said, I coach journalists how to be better on camera, but we're all really concerned with this thing called COVID. Can you just do a meditation for us? Because you seem to have it all together. And reluctantly, I did it. And we did the meditation. And then that's the day that the news Yogi was really born. And so now my mission is to really help journalists manage their stress, manage their emotional health through things like somatics, through coaching. And I got my coaching certification, and it's been quite a journey. You said earlier, I just wrote a book. I have a copy of it here. Journalists break news, don't let it break you. So this is something that I'm really excited, really proud about. And in it, we talk about somatics. We talk about the 8 limbs of yoga. We talk about all of these important things. And ultimately, my vision has expanded, luckily, through working with you. I've come into even more alignment of where I'm going, what I'm doing, and I've realized that regardless of whatever work I'm doing, whether it's in the journalism space, the yoga space, the coaching space, the author writing space, it's just centered around 3 things, and that's community, sustainability, and equity. And that's what my focus is.
Wow. Oh, yes. Thank you for sharing so much of that and being so honest about the really beginning journeys. I mean, at first just around the realities of being a first gen and starting in that pressure of so many of us, you know, if you're and I want to be clear about when we use the term first gen, right? Because for a long time it was really hard for me to claim that identity because I am an immigrant. I was born in Colombia. I immigrated here very young. And so I technically am not a first generation in this country, but there were a lot of things that I did. I was the first gen about. I was the first one to go to college in this school. There was a lot first gen entrepreneur. Leslie and I have our friends talk about this a lot. And so the title first gen also really connects to people that are just doing things for the first time and that you're really experiencing this for the first time. And a lot of this work, right, our conversations here about normalizing these types of conversation, not only about our mental health, but our overall well-being, but really thinking about, oh, there's something beyond what we've experienced. There's something beyond what we've known to be true. And it feels really scary. And sometimes it makes me really sad, but a lot of us have had to learn that through really difficult experiences, such as Leslie shared. I've shared a little bit about mine, and the work that I think we're so passionate about is hopefully let's not have everyone get to that breaking point. Let's try to start learning about these types of techniques before we get there so we can continue to do this work, but we don't have to break down. Perfect for your title. Before we jump in. And I really like what you said about the stillness, and I think that goes really nicely into our managing our mind, in especially any of us that are in nonprofit space, the social sector. I hear we've compared a lot of notes around with journalism as well. There's such a deep urgency consistently. You're constantly feel like there's another, challenge that we're faced with. There's a consistent problem that we feel we are responsible for. And yes, we each have our own responsibilities in that. But the stillness that I love you mentioned is so important to that. And it connects to managing our mind that we wanted to talk about here today. So Leslie, what do you think stillness and this building of awareness that you talked about, how does that connect to our managing our mind, and what does really managing our mind really mean in this context that we're talking about?
Yeah, I love this question. So I teach and have taught a lot of my students, whether in coaching or in yoga, we have to be human first. And human first, just at that surface level, right? What does it mean to be a human? But I take it deeper, and this is what I teach when I'm when a lot of folks say, "Okay, but I can't be still. I can't do the thing." And there's that common misconception that stillness literally means just sitting in a corner, turning everything off, and just sitting there trying to be still. I mean, for some folks, that is a beautiful practice and that works and that's really effective. And maybe one day we'll get there. But I will be honest, that is not entirely always something that even I do. And so if we take a look at the word human, this is a curriculum that I put together. It's really my life's curriculum. And in the letter H of human, it's you just simply hold space. And so what does that mean? Stillness means just reconnecting, like going in and trying to figure out, what am I thinking today? What am I feeling? Like even right now, as folks might be listening either live or back through the recording, listen around you. What are all the things that you can hear? Can you hear the hum of an AC? Can you hear a partner? Maybe you're co-working. Maybe you hear a pet. Maybe your children are running around. Maybe you hear traffic outside. Maybe you're at a coffee shop and you can hear all of this movement. So first, holding space to invite this stillness of your mind, more so not silencing the mind, but just being an observer and
Mm.
trying to figure out what does my body feel? Because and I say this a lot to my yoga students. If your body doesn't know what it feels, it doesn't know what it needs.
Mhm.
So if your body doesn't know what it feels, it doesn't know what it needs. And that goes, I mean, for everything, mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally. And so that first letter, H, hold space. Once we can hold space, then the letter U begins to come in. Understanding your stress response. That's a big one. How does stress manifest for you? Potentially activation. How do you notice when your body is getting activated? For me personally, and I always like to use myself as an example because again, it's part of normalizing this
Mhm.
and sort of breaking through the myths that, oh my gosh, she was a TV news anchor and she can do this and perfectionism and all the things. Yeah, and also I'm human just like everybody else. So for me, one of the ways stress shows up is I get really um what's the word, like really short, like like um like temporal.
Mm,
Yeah,
mhm.
like um just very snippy.
Mm.
That's one of the ways stress shows up for me. Another way that stress shows up for me is I shut down. Like I just stop talking. I'm a talker, and when stress is showing up, I don't talk. Like one word answers, like that's it. I also sometimes can feel stress in my body. I'll feel like a heat through the back of my neck. Migraines were a really big thing that I was chalking up to health and then realized, oh, wait, this is directly tied to my mental health. And even my doctors told me, like, um, and so that's another way. And then one other final big way that stress shows up for me is I begin to have a lot of gut issues.
Mhm.
So trouble keeping food down or feeling nauseous or not really having an appetite. These are all of the ways that stress shows up. And so for folks out there to really bring that inquiry of how do you hold space? How do you create the space to pay attention to then understand how stress shows up for you. So, for anybody who goes days on end or weeks working on long projects and oh, it's 5 o'clock, I forgot to eat. Did you really forget to eat? Or is it just your body offloading the digestive system
Mm.
because you're in survival mode? And it's saying, oh, we don't need to eat right now because we're in survival mode. And so, how can we keep going?
Oof. Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes. So much richness there. And I love your human method. I mean, I've been privileged to have heard it a few times now in our work together and also experiencing your work. But what I love about it, I know you intentionally created it for journalists when you started your practice, but it just connects so much to, again, so many of us that are social impact leaders that are just human beings that are trying to navigate. For you, it can be maybe navigating a family situation, maybe navigating just managing multiple projects, or it can be, managing an entire conference, a workshop, a leadership cohort, so much that you are cultivating. And when we put so much, so many of us that are really care so much about the work that we do, we prioritize the needs of others above our own, because we've been taught that that is how we can do the best work that we can, to be selfless, to care for others, to put your needs before, at the end, everyone first. And and I understand the humility that, what I think we're really searching for is like how we can come together, but in a way to come together that doesn't mean having to fully disregard everything that you need to survive, to function. And so learning this method has been super helpful for me as well. And what I love that you said and you started with is that there's that, the stillness is that a lot of people have a misconception about meditation or yoga or again, mental health practices. But as we've talked a lot about on this series, there are so many different ways and practices of well-being, and that it's important for us to find what works for us. Because one of the biggest like moments I had, that again I'd been told like meditate, that's going to help, and it did help for a while, but when your body's deregulated and our body is really anxious and like just really stuck, it actually doesn't help to sit still. It actually makes it harder. And that's what's one of the I worked with this beautiful monk that was telling me about this, and I was sharing with him how hard it was for me to meditate when I was coming out of my burnout cycle. And he goes, "Well, you probably, there's a reason for that. How about you move around? How about," and we walked around the whole campus and then came back together and then started moving forward. And that helps so much. So my point is that it's important for us to recognize like I love what Leslie said, what our body needs, but also recognizing that not everything that we hear is going to work for us, because there's so many different practices and it all ends up depending on what is our body searching for. And in that, also the very different realities of the different cultures that we exist in. And I want to bring it to our conversations around the news cycle and the upcoming election. I know I received messages about how happy people were to have had this, that for us to be hosting this conversation, because so many people we're having a really hard time processing last week's presidential debate, the Supreme Court ruling, so much that is happening just within our country, on top of everything that we've been feeling across the world for months now, years. It feels like it never ends. But for for us, Leslie, as a journalist, as someone that lives in this world and lives in this and consistently, and you're deeply passionate about this, um, what do you think is important for us to keep in mind as we are trying to keep our body whole, regulate our body, and also trying to stay informed and trying to listen and trying to stay abreast of everything that's happening? Like, how do you support or advise, leaders to do that, to think about both, and like what are some practices we can consider?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's also a huge question,
It
right?
is.
And it almost seems impossible to answer, which is exactly the it's in the same spirit of how a lot of journalists, change makers, disruptors are showing up right now. How do you answer and help solve such huge questions, such huge issues that many folks feel really deeply connected to? It's almost like your career has now become your life's responsibility. And that's
Mhm,
such a heavy burden to carry. And so, even still, I take it back to human, right? We
mhm,
being human first. So, we hold space, we understand how our body responds to stress, but also letter M. I've shared letter M in many different ways, but ultimately it comes to how do you manifest your own magic?
mm,
What is your mindset? What is that soundtrack that you are continuously playing in your head? When you wake up in the morning, is the first thing that you grab your phone and then you see all the notifications from the news companies, and do you scroll on Instagram and then you see all of the latest breaking news updates? That is a lot. It is a lot. Our bodies our bodies have been on this earth for years and years and years, and our nervous system is what has made that possible.
mm,
We have and I'm sure your audience knows and understands this, but at the very most basic term, you show up, right? And your brain on a daily basis is taking a look around. Like, how are we doing? Is it safe? How are we doing? Is it safe? And then it sends little messages into the other parts of your brain, and it draws on memories, past experiences. And based off those memories and experiences, then it knows, okay, we should react like potentially this is a life-threatening situation, so we should react in such. And so what happens is our body starts pumping these stress hormones into our body to help prepare us for survival. And that was all really great when we were out on the lands, when our people were on the lands. Maybe they were getting chased by a tiger or a lion, whatever it might have been. But nowadays, our technology has evolved so fast, but our nervous system has not evolved in such an incredibly fast way. I mean, 6 months ago, everyone was asking, what's really AI? And now it's everywhere. And so now our bodies don't know how to decipher between this notification that said something about a Supreme Court decision. It doesn't know how to decipher between, is this a life-threatening situation immediately or is it not? And so what happens is all of those stress hormones continuously are moving through our bodies, and it gets layered and layered and layered, because that's not just one notification. That's just the first post that came up on the Instagram feed when you scrolled. But then as you scroll, then more people, and then more people, and then maybe a friend texts you about it and you try to get off of it. Okay, let's go to LinkedIn. And then you're seeing it on LinkedIn, and then you try to turn off your computer, but then you get the notification. And so of course we feel dysregulated. And so that takes me back to letter M, right? How can we check in with our mindset, manifest our magic? And what do I mean by that? How are we nurturing ourselves? When you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing that you do? And this is really hard, especially for journalists who I've worked with mostly. Again, I have opened up to other folks here, but mainly journalists. And so carve out in the mornings, like if you can't do 20 minutes without grabbing your phone first, do five
Mm-hmm.
minutes, 5 minutes, and don't look at your phone. Throughout the day, this is a setting that I have. I still get the notifications and everything, but I have now set up a notification system that I get to decide when all of these are appearing. So every evening around 5 or 6, I get an evening summary, if you will, and I can click on it, and then it goes through and says, you got this notification and that notification and that notification. And so for me as a journalist, it is important to stay informed, but also we get the autonomy to be able to set those boundaries. That's really important. Letter A, how do we realign with ourselves? What are the ways in which we can reconnect with being back to our regulated selves? So what does that mean? Does it mean you're going to dance? We talked about the meditation and the stillness, right? For some folks, stillness will not work. As you said, our bodies are so activated, and in some ways it can do harm. So are you going to a Zumba class? Are you going to go dance with your friends? Are
Mm-hmm.
you going to call up someone and use the spoken word to help regulate, and just ask for permission? Hey, do you have a few minutes? I'm really dealing with something. Yeah, of course. Let me know. Share it with them. Yoga. For me, one of my biggest meditation techniques is cooking. I love
Mm.
cooking. It
She's great
brings
at it.
it brings all the five senses in. You are, cutting the bell peppers. You're hearing the crunch. You can smell the flavors. You feel the juices of the yummy bell pepper as you're putting it into the pan. You can hear the pan, the sizzle. I mean,
Mm.
it's a beautiful way. Just set the phone aside, right? And it's so important to be able to do that. And then that letter N in human, nurture these practices. Check in maybe daily. Maybe you're checking in on these practices weekly, monthly, whatever your capacity is. Again, making these practices accessible for you.
Mm.
And it's okay to unplug for a little bit.
Oof, it's okay to unplug for a little bit. Do we hear that, y'all? Yes, I love this because this is what we're saying again is this does not take away from the leader that you are. This does not take away from the impact you can create. What it's going to do, it's going to make you stronger. It's going to make you aligned. It's going to support you in sustaining yourself because these habits that we can create in acknowledging I need this, I need to stay informed. So we're not taking it away, but how do we incorporate it into our lives in a way where we don't feel like we're overwhelmed and drowning and want to cry after listening watching all of these videos
Yeah.
or podcasts? Like it's normal. And can we also just normalize that? Like that feeling of feeling overwhelmed by the abundance of information that we are consistently feeling, you're not alone. That is very normal. I love this one of the facts that I had heard, and I've used it so much this year because I've loved it. It's the amount of information that we receive in one day is the same amount of information that someone in the 1800s would receive in their entire lifetime. Like we
Mm.
are receiving so much information, and to Leslie's point, our brains have not evolved as fast as technology. So the more that we can use these habits to keep the things that we love, right? If you love being informed, you love learning, don't take that away from you. If that feeds your soul, absolutely. But there's a different way of how we can still do that. And that's what I love us having these conversations of how we can do that. I also want to acknowledge, a lot of the conversations we have here are around the responsibilities we hold as individuals, right? And that we're talking a lot about what you can do, the habits, how you wake up, your routines, all of that is beautiful. And also, there are organizational responsibilities that organizations and institutions can take to also give space for their employees to do that, right? Because that sounds all really beautiful, having 5 minutes in the morning for yourself. But if your manager is texting you in the middle of the night or texting you at 2, 3 a.m., expecting you to respond the minute you wake up, I understand where it's hard to set those boundaries. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I want to be aware of your time as well, Leslie. Before we hop off, I just want to talk a bit about that of what do you think that as, maybe media and news outlets that you're working with, but I think it can also relate to social impact, social sector organizations that are also trying to think about this. In your thoughts, like what is it that organization leaders can keep in mind as they're imposing all of these expectations and need for information on them?
Yeah. I think unfortunately we live in a society where, you know, the bottom line is money, right? So whether you're a media company or you're someone who is doing social impact work, we need funding, right? We need funding to be able to do the thing to change the world. That's just the bottom line. Money equals power, power equals money. If we're looking at it from that point of view, a less holistic version, holistic still has a way of coming around to it, because if you're working with folks who are a shell of who they've been, how can you possibly expect them to be able to show up and do good work if they're just a shell of a human? And so taking that into consideration of, you have your brightest minds at your organizations who want to change the world, who want to disrupt things, who want to be change makers, visionaries, but do they even have the ability to take a breath? And so taking that into consideration, and absolutely yes, like this this idea of wellness and holistic circled lives, it's important, and the responsibility should not lie solely on the people who are working in these companies. But and also um we don't have to wait for the world to change for us to change our own world.
Mm.
And so, what are the little ways that maybe Again, you can set your own boundaries and not betray yourself as you're moving through the world. So if there is a boss who consistently says, do this, do this, do this, do this, you don't have to say yes for the 20th time. You have the autonomy to say, I'm at capacity right now. I can't do this.
Mm.
And it's hard. Trust me, it is very hard. And it's taken me years. And who knows how it will continue as I move into different companies, different organizations. If I continue in solo entrepreneurship, it's hard for me even to say no to myself when I'm thinking through building my own business. But it's important. It's important and it's needed because at the end of the day, bringing it back to who are you outside of your title, your headline, your byline, whatever your LinkedIn says. Who are you as just Manuela, not Manuela of Con Fuerza, not Leslie of the News Yogi, not Leslie of such and such media company? Who are we when we take away these titles? And
Mm.
if that person is not whole, then we need to do some reevaluating.
Mhm. Oh, so beautiful. I love that, and, a dear mentor of mine, John Kobara, and I talk about this a lot. He has this idea of the human index and how organizations can continue to support their leaders, their employees to continue to build their purpose even within their organization. And
Mhm.
so as organization leaders, as you're thinking about how you can support, your employees in this next election cycle, as your leaders are consistently trying to manage the realities of everything that's happening in our country, everything that's happening around the world, and everything that may be happening personally, on top of pursuing your passions, on top of completing your mission and everything. Thinking about the one, Leslie, what I hear you saying too is like, how do we feed ourselves outside of just our job? Like, where are the other areas of our lives that we need to also feed into so we can have a full human experience and not just like my job is my everything? And
Mhm.
also as employees, supporting that. Like if you have an employee that sees that there's an interest there, and maybe in the future they do want to become a solo entrepreneur and they want to grow, or they see themselves growing, like there are ways for you to build that skill set within your company. There are
Mhm.
ways for you to start managing bigger projects or being more creative and creating products or tools or services with the security and safety of an organization. And that gives motivation to employees, that gives support to employees. And the big one I want to say is the very important need to give space. So, as if we're using Leslie's method of the human method and holding space, giving employees the opportunity to take those mental health days, to if checking in after a really difficult debate or election cycle or something that happened in the news, or in society that's happening, checking in with your employees and how are you doing? How are, if you're a woman of color, if you're a woman and you just found out that, your rights are changing and now you're not able to move forward, then it's important to be able to check in and knowing that you have the freedom there. So we'll just end with this last question, to be mindful of your time, Leslie. But I ask this to all of our guests that are with us: is living a life con fuerza is about reclaiming our inner power to live in alignment with our values. How are you choosing to live a life con fuerza, and what does living a life con fuerza mean to you, Leslie?
Yeah, it just means that rest is productive. Rest is resistance. Rest is power. Rest is important. And if we can't rest, then we're burning ourselves into the ground. So that's it. That's it for me.
Yes, Leslie, thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you for being here, for sharing your wisdom and your stories. to our community. I know you need to hop off, so I will let you hop off. Thank you, thank you. And if anyone wants to purchase Leslie's new book, we will link that in the resource page, and we will also share access to be able to work with Leslie as well and continue your journey. Thank you, Leslie. Any final thoughts or questions you have, or before you hop off?
No, I don't think so. If anybody has any questions, would like to continue the conversation, my DMs are always open. You can visit my website, thenewsyogi.com. And I did have just one more thing that I had thought through, and then I'll leave it there. But for anyone who, like managers who are asking questions, like sometimes it doesn't feel safe. Like, how are you doing? That feels like a really huge unloading to do. So one simple question that I've done workshops with managers, particularly in news, just asking, maybe reframing it just a very simple way and saying, how can I make your life easier this week? And that
Mm.
way you're taking into account, it's hard. You may not be able to help them, especially if you are a manager who maybe doesn't identify in the same way that your employee does, through gender, through background, through so many layers. But just saying simply, how can I make your life easier this week? And I think that alone will go such a long way. So,
Oh,
yay.
wonderful way to end it. Thank you so much, Leslie.
All right.
I will
Take
see you
care.
so soon. Have a
Okay.
good luck with your class. I'll talk to you
Thank you.
soon.
Bye.
Okay. Well, thank you all for being here and being present and listening. I'm so grateful that you were here with us today, and hopefully, this conversation was supportive to all of you. Before we hop off, I do just want to remind you of our next session that is coming up next week. Give me 1 second there we go. Yes, we have another wonderful session coming up next week for our Wisdom Wednesday summer series, and I am so excited to welcome Asante Rine. She is a licensed social worker and the founder of Chief Wellness Officer of Axon Group. She is doing incredible work, mostly within the New York community, but across the country as well. And she has this movement called the Retiring Superwoman movement, where she is really questioning what it means to be resilient, what, especially for Black women that have had to hold and carry so much for forever, how we are retiring this need to have to be a superwoman. So join us next Wednesday, July 10th at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 Central, 9 a.m. Pacific. Once again, here as we start to unpack how we don't glamorize resilience anymore and how we can come back to ourselves. I also want to welcome you, for those of you who didn't already or haven't already signed up. Con Fuerza launched the Nurturing Spaces community a few weeks ago when we started and kicked off our summer series. And this is a free WhatsApp community where you can reflect, connect, and receive updates about upcoming nurturing spaces that we are creating here, including Wisdom Wednesdays. We have a new series of work that we are launching called Alignment and Connection Circle Live Calls, where you'll be able to come together with other social impact leaders and have a live session reflection rooted in the restorative practices, restorative justice practices. And so we can start talking about all this work that we're trying to figure out together. And you'll also have an opportunity to talk about what it means to be in aligned action. This work, it's challenging, but it's not impossible. And if the more that we can support each other in holding ourselves accountable to normalizing this work, to embodying this work, to imperfectly taking action, the stronger we'll be able to be. And so we'll also be doing aligned action co-working sessions where you'll be able to just come together with any projects, ideas, any things that you're just working on. And we can co-work together live on call, and then we'll be able to incorporate some other practices to help us to build a stronger and healthier relationship with productivity. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful that you are part of this community, that you're engaging with us. If you haven't already, engage with our resource library. Our resource library allows you to connect to and see all of the episodes. I'll quickly share that screen as well, just so you can see other episodes and past experiences that and wisdom that we've already received. You can also see the oop, there we go. Links are available. This resource library not only gives you access to all of the different episodes and conversations that we've already had, but it also gives you access to continue each conversation and continue to learn more about these topics we're talking about, from videos to podcasts to articles to books to visual aids and resources on how to continue to connect to yourself. Each episode has a series of workshops and articles and somatic practices at the end that you can use to incorporate into your daily practice. So thank you once again. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your week, and I will see you next week on Wisdom Wednesday. Have a great day, everyone.